Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the NFL Draft Series. This is day number 6, and I'll be taking a look at the AFC North today. So if you haven't seen any of the videos in this series so far, this is how I do things. I go team by team, pick by pick, giving each individual pick a letter grade, and then I'll give an overall grade to the teams. I don't do the whole plus minus thing. I just do A, B, C, D, or F. It's really difficult to get an F for me, so I just try to give these teams the benefit of the doubt overall. But with that being said, the overall grade is not up on the screen at this point in time, just so you guys have to watch, listen, and not get too many preconceived notions about the team grade overall as compared to the individual picks. But we're going to start off with the Baltimore Ravens. They had pick number 14, and they took safety Kyle Hamilton out of Notre Dame. This was an A pick. Obviously, they did have a little bit of a position in need here. Not like the biggest one, but when you have a guy like Kyle Hamilton fall to you, you don't ask too many questions. You just kind of take him there. And then with that new defense, they'll be very interesting to see how they play around him. A lot of people had him as a top 5 talent in this year's class. So getting him at 14th, great value there. And then in the 25th pick, they trade back a couple different times. They ended up with Tyler Linderbaum, center out of Iowa. Center was obviously a position of need after losing Bozeman. This is an A pick for me. This was a guy that was being talked about as a top 10 talent in this year's class. Very good center. It's going to help their team, going to help that offensive line and lead them for years to come. And then in the second round, they took David Ojabo, edge out of Michigan. Obviously, he has the injury from the pro day, so he's probably not going to play this year or very late in the year at the very least. But getting a guy that was a top 20 talent in this year's class, at pick 45, is a great value there. They can redshirt him. He's also very good friends with Odafe Owe. So, that little tandem of those two could really pay dividends in the future. Then in the third round, they took Travis Jones, defensive tackle out of UConn. I was very shocked that he was still there in the third round. You could make a case that maybe the Ravens take Jordan Davis at 14 if he's there. Now you get Travis Jones 2 rounds later. And yes, Jordan Davis is a freak athlete, but so is Travis Jones. He just didn't get the recognition because he played at UConn. But very strong Senior Bowl week, very strong combine. This is a steal in the third round, so that's an easy A as well. Then we get down to Daniel Faalele in the fourth round, offensive tackle out of Minnesota. This is a guy a lot of people thought was going to go day 2. Obviously, he's a little bit of a project since he is 6'8", like 380 pounds, but he's going to fit into their scheme very well. And they're probably not going to need him play right away either. So very good value, good scheme fit, and he's probably going to turn into a very good player in time. They've worked with larger players in the past like Orlando Brown Jr., so I don't think this is going to be a problem for them by any means. Then their next pick in the fourth round, since they had a ton of them, they took Jalen Armour Davis, cornerback out of Alabama. Could argue it's a position need just because Marcus Peters was hurt last year. Marlon Humphrey got hurt. Anthony Averett left. So you probably need somebody else in that room too as depth. A guy that played pretty well at Alabama this year. There are some concerns that he didn't start earlier on in his career, but it's still Alabama and they still have a ton of talent there. Gave this pick a B overall. There were some guys that thought he was going to go day 2. This is probably right in line where I thought he was going to go end of round 3, beginning of round 4. And then the next pick they had in the fourth round was Charlie Kolar, tight end out of Iowa State. So I gave this pick a B overall. Pretty similar to Mark Andrews in a lot of ways. Predominantly played in the slot at Iowa State. This dude is not going to be a blocking tight end by any means, but they do love their tight ends. It seems like the Ravens are trying to get back to what they did and did well in recent years prior to last season. So add another tight end, one that could be a little bit of a mismatch, especially in terms of a slot tight end, could pay dividends there. So I gave that pick a B overall. Then they took a punter in the fourth round, Jordan Stott, punter out of Penn State. I gave that pick a D. Just anytime you pick a special teams player before like the end of the 6th round or the 7th round, it's just going to be a D for me automatically. Can't say too much about that. But they are replacing a long-term punter in Sam Cook, so hopefully Jordan Stott's the guy for them. That's all I got to say about that. And then they double-dipped at tight end with Isaiah Likely, Coastal Carolina tight end. I gave this pick a C. If you didn't already draft Charlie Kolar, probably be a B, but you got 3 tight ends now that all kind of do similar things. So you could argue they're interchangeable. Maybe if one of these guys don't work out, then at least you got 2 of them, but seems like a weird pick in my opinion. And that's pretty much all I'm going to say about it. Likely he was this guy that we thought was pretty athletic and he didn't test out like it, didn't have a good Senior Bowl week. So I can't really say too much about him at this point in time. Then the last 4th round pick they had, since they had 5 of them, 6 of them, excuse me, there was a lot. Damarian Williams, corner out of Houston. I give this pick a B. Seems like a decent scheme fit. Probably a little bit more of a developmental prospect than you want to take in the 4th round, but end of the 4th round, it's essentially a 5th round pick. Plus, they already had 6 4th round picks, so they can afford to take some shots on guys like that. Then the last pick that they did have was in the 6th round, where they took Tyler Beatty, running back out of Missouri, guy that led the SEC in rushing last season. Had some running back depth at the very least. At this point in time, we already know that Mike Davis has signed with the Ravens as well. So now they have J.K. Dobbins, Gus Edwards, Mike Davis, Tyler Beatty. You can throw Justice Hill and Tyson Williams in there if you really want to, but I'm not going to talk too much about those guys. So Beatty's a good undersized back, good pass catcher out of the backfield. Probably like your complement back, maybe use him in third downs in the future, but kind of an insurance policy on J.K. Dobbins because he does some of the things that Dobbins does, but just at a lesser level. And getting him in the 6th round was pretty good value overall, so did give that a B. And overall, I believe the Ravens had one of the best drafts in this year's draft. They get an easy A for me. Obviously, if you look at their first 5 picks, they were all A's, so you can't do too much better than that. Granted, the rest of the draft, there's a C and a D in there, but still overall, all-around draft, they addressed a lot of areas of need, and they got good value at the same time. This is how you draft, and it seems like this is what the Ravens do every year. Then we'll move over to the Cincinnati Bengals. They did not have too many picks. They had 6 in total, which is kind of crazy compared to the 6 4th-round picks that the Ravens had. But in the first round, they took Daxton Hill, safety out of Michigan. Gave this pick a B. I'm going to explain it just real quick because I love Daxton Hill. If it was probably any other team, it'd be easy A pick. But now you're drafting a safety. You already got Jesse Bates, so this probably just means you're not going to pay Jesse Bates and Daxton Hill takes over for him long-term. Or if you keep him, maybe they play next to each other. Maybe you play Daxton Hill in the slot, but you already got Mike Hilton in the slot, so that's kind of a question mark. Maybe you play Daxton Hill on the outside at corner. That's something that could be very interesting. Then the next pick, they go and pick Cam Taylor-Britt, corner out of Nebraska. I gave that pick a C. He was like a 3rd-round pick for me. Granted, it was end of 2nd round, pretty close there, but he's a guy that was better off being a slot corner in my opinion. Seems like they're going to have to play him on the outside, especially with Mike Hilton already in the slot. So thus we get back to the whole Daxton Hill thing. So I don't particularly like these 2 picks together, especially in the grand scheme of everything too, although I do love Daxton Hill, the player. Then in the 3rd round, they took Zachary Carter, defensive lineman out of Florida. Granted, it was the end of round 3. Probably thought he was closer to like a 5th, 6th round pick. Maybe he's a decent scheme fit, but it sounds like they're going to play him at tackle, maybe in that 3 tech. Might rotate in. Not a guy I'm super excited about, so I gave that pick a C as well. Cordell Volson, offensive tackle out of North Dakota State. Obviously, we've seen Dalen Radons come out last year. Volson this year. He was the other tackle there. Got a lot of experience. I think this is a little bit of reach for me personally. 5th, 6th round grade on him, but could be a good depth piece. Maybe turns into something, maybe doesn't. Honestly, just a C pick for me overall. A little bit of a reach overall as well. Then in the 5th round, they went with Tyson Anderson, safety out of Toledo. Gave that pick a B. Good developmental safety. He's got good testing measurables. Maybe he develops into something. Maybe he doesn't. At the very least, you got a guy that's going to contribute on special teams. And then in the 7th round, they took Jeffrey Gunter, defense end out of Coastal Carolina. I gave this pick an A because this is a guy that's probably a 5th, 6th round pick as well. And they got him in the 7th round. Does offer some good upside as well. And seems like a guy that should be able to fit their scheme very well. So overall, a very interesting draft for the Bengals. I gave it a B. It's probably like a B- if you're doing the plus minus thing, but right on the edge of C and B. Some of the picks I like to see be a little bit better, but some of the players that they did get, I did like, especially Daxton Hill, Tyson Anderson, and Jeffrey Gunter. I don't think Volson's a bad pick. I just think they picked him a little bit too early. I don't think Cam Taylor-Britt's a bad pick. I think they just picked him a little too early as well. But with that being said, we'll get moved over to the Cleveland Browns. And they had a pretty interesting draft overall as well. They had the first 3rd round pick that they had. They took Martin Emerson, cornerback out of Mississippi State. Gave the pick itself a C. I do like Martin Emerson. I do think he can develop into a good player. You could argue corner was their deepest position with Denzel Ward, Greedy Williams, Greg Newsome, and Troy Hill there already. Turns out they traded Troy Hill after this pick, so I don't know who's going to play the slot there. Assume it's going to be Greg Newsome, but kind of feels like you're forcing something because you took a corner now. You probably could have took somebody at a bigger position of need and not traded Troy Hill, but that's probably a different story for a different day. But I think Martin Emerson develops in time. Maybe they don't have to rush him right away, but is good corner depth at the very least. Then the 2nd, 3rd round pick they took Alex Wright, defensive end out of UAB. I gave this pick a D. It's a position of need, but this is a guy that had like a 6th round grade on, so I don't like it that much. I think there is some raw development that could be there, but it's probably going to take some time. I don't know if he's ever going to develop into anything personally at the NFL level. And then at the end of the 3rd round, they took David Bell, wide receiver out of Purdue. I gave this pick an A because the Browns really did have a need at wide receiver. Jarvis Landry was let go. He is very, very similar to Jarvis Landry and what he can do on the football field. Yes, his testing measurables weren't great, but we already expected that. We knew he wasn't going to be this freak athlete. He's probably better than he tested, but he's a very good player. He's a guy that produced for 3 years at Purdue with average to below average quarterback play, and alongside Rondale Moore for part of that time. So I really just have no doubts about David Bell's skill. I think he'll be a decent wide receiver at the NFL level. If you're talking like fantasy football, maybe he turns into something there, maybe doesn't. But as an NFL football player, he's going to be a good player. And then the 4th round, they took Perion Winfrey, defensive tackle out of Oklahoma. This one's an easy A. They did need some help at that defensive tackle position. Perion Winfrey's a guy that a lot of us thought was going to go in the 2nd round. Had a great Senior Bowl week. Defensive MVP at the Senior Bowl. Then he's still out there in round 4, so that's a great value overall. Then we have Cade York, kicker out of LSU. Once again, special teams players in rounds before 6 or 7. It's going to be a D pick from me automatically. Not going to say too much else about that. 5th round, they took Jerome Ford, running back out of Cincinnati. He's a guy I wasn't super high on myself personally. And then you could argue running back wasn't really a position need, so I gave the pick a C overall. Maybe you move on from Kareem Hunt to Ernest Jackson this year or next year, and then you have Jerome Ford as kind of a backup or the 3rd running back there overall. We'll see how that all shakes out. Maybe he's okay in that role, but nothing too crazy there. The 6th round, they took a guy that I really did like that really didn't play or do much in 2021, and it's Mike Woods out of Oklahoma, formerly of Arkansas. I gave this pick a C. I do like what this guy can do on the football field, but he's probably a 7th round pick or a priority free agent. The combine made him look better and showcased some of his skills that he did offer when he was at Arkansas. Transferred to Oklahoma, bet on himself, kind of got buried there, didn't play a lot, got a little banged up too. Didn't have the most productive season, so can't really blame him too much there. He was trying to make a statement and he was just not able to make it. Obviously, he still got drafted, so you can't say too much. But, if this was a 7th round pick, probably be a B, but since it's in the 6th round, I give it a C. And then they took Isaiah Thomas, defensive end out of Oklahoma. This one's an easy A for me. Guy probably should have went earlier in day 3. Had a lot of production at Oklahoma. This guy knows how to play football and at the very least is a very good rotational player at the NFL level. So I have no qualms about this. I'm kind of shocked that he was even there at that point in time. And then their last pick they took, Dawson Deaton, center out of Texas Tech, a very smart, intelligent player. Started for a couple of years there. Can't really say too much bad about him. It's a B pick overall. He's going to be the backup center. And I think he's going to do well in that role. If they really need him to go in there, he's not going to be a guy that can hurt their team overall. Maybe develops into a little bit something more, but probably just a career backup at the center position. And that's not bad in the 7th round, honestly. So I think the Browns addressed a decent amount of needs with this draft. I think they got some good value, but then they also reached on some other picks. So mixed draft overall, but it's a solid B grade, just a straight up B even if we were doing the plus minus thing. Then last but not least, we got the Pittsburgh Steelers, and they were maybe one of the bigger names in the draft just because we knew they kind of had a need at quarterback. Yes, they brought in Mitchell Trubisky, and he'll be all right probably for this year if he does end up starting. But they also drafted a quarterback with their 1st overall pick in Kenny Pickett, quarterback out of Pittsburgh. Gave this pick a B. Obviously, it was a position need, but you could make a case that maybe you build up some of the rest of the team first and then kind of roll with Trubisky, take one of those other guys later since we know they all fell to day 2 at the very least. But at the same time, the Steelers didn't know that was going to happen. And one of the things that Kevin Colbert said before he was going to leave is he wanted to leave the team with a new franchise quarterback. So I feel like he took Kenny Pickett because he knew he was the safe play and he didn't want to grab like a Malik Willis or Matt Corral or Sam Howell or somebody like that that needed some development and it was going to take some time because then you're stuck with the new regime and we're kind of stuck with this guy. And then you got to give him a couple of years to develop and see if he turns into anything. He just kind of went with the safe play. And yes, you could argue maybe you're kind of stuck with that guy because they are the safe play and they're never going to be bad enough for a couple of years to really get rid of him. But it's better than having this big project on your hands and not being able to move on from it at the same time too. So that's kind of why I gave it a B overall. That's kind of a long-winded story and everything, but that is what it is. In the 2nd round, they took George Pickens, wide receiver out of Georgia. Gave this pick a B. It's an interesting pick. You could argue wide receiver is a position of need for them. Reminds me a lot of Chase Claypool too, but not as big, not as fast. So we'll see how that all shakes out in time there. Give it a B. It wasn't a bad pick by any means, though. Then in the 3rd round, they took DeMarvin Leal, defensive lineman out of Texas A&M. This guy coming into this year was being mocked as a top 10 pick in the NFL draft. Had an average year. He just didn't really get better. That's kind of the big knock on him. Then he got busted for some weed too. I can't remember if he was on campus or off campus, but that kind of knocked his draft stock too. Maybe he was a 2nd round pick if that didn't happen, but kind of a guy that just underwhelmed overall this year. He's an A though for me because he's going to be a guy that fits really well in the Steelers scheme. and could be potentially a value as well. So can't say too much bad about him or that pick overall. And then in the 4th round, took Calvin Austin, wide receiver out of Memphis. Shocked that he was on the board at this point in time. Guy that tested out crazy well at the combine, had production back-to-back seasons at Memphis. We've seen guys like D. Eskridge and Tutu Atwell going in the 2nd round last year. And Calvin Austin's going in the 4th round, and he's arguably better than both those guys. So that's kind of my spiel about that without getting too far down that rabbit hole. Very good pick there. Obviously, they already picked George Pickens earlier, so now you have a full wide receiver room. Maybe he just comes in and takes that Ray McLeod role, but at the very least, you got electric playmaker, a deep threat, and a good punt returner at the very least. So we'll see how that all shakes out. And it's very interesting, kind of the strategy they use too, because when you think of this team, you got George Pickens, you got Chase Claypool, and you got Calvin Austin now. 3 guys that can win down the field deep. And then one of the bigger knocks on Kenny Pickett outside of his hands is that he has an average NFL arm. So it's going to be interesting to see how they play with that arm and going and attacking downfield deep, and especially the fact that their offensive line still needs a little bit of work. Then in the 6th round, they took Connor Hayward, fullback out of Michigan State. I don't hate Connor Hayward by any means. I give this pick a C overall just because you're taking a fullback in the 6th round. Just take him in the 7th round if you're going to take one. You also have Derek Watt on the team too, so he's probably going to get cut. And either way, one of these guys is going to get mad on the defensive side because their brother's going to get cut at fullback, whether it's TJ Watt with Derek Watt being cut or whether it's Cam Hayward with Connor Hayward getting cut. I don't think they're keeping both fullbacks around. Then in the 7th round, they took Mark Robinson, linebacker out of Ole Miss. Gave that pick a C grade. He was not somebody I expected to get drafted. Had an okay pro day, decent college career, but if you were going to take him as a priority free agent and you just didn't want to compete with other people, taking him in the 7th round does make some sense. And then last but not least, and with their other 7th round pick, they took Chris Oladukin, quarterback out of South Dakota State. Give this grade a D overall. He was not a guy that I expect to get drafted whatsoever. Maybe sign on as a free agent, but I guess if you don't want to compete with everybody else, maybe that's why they did it. But you already drafted Kenny Pickett. You got Mason Rudolph. You got Mitch Trubisky. It's a guy that's not going to make the team anyways. Maybe keep him on the practice squad and see if he develops, but 7th round pick, probably could just sign up for a free agent, not been competing with too many other teams though. But overall, did give the Pittsburgh Steelers a B grade. They addressed some areas of need. I will give them one big knock. They didn't draft a single offensive lineman in this draft. And there was a lot of good developmental offensive linemen, even if they're not starting for you day one in this draft. And you didn't even take a shot on at least one of them. So that's kind of my big knock on the Steelers this year. But it was a B grade overall. Got some good players, addressed some positions in need. Just that offensive line, still kind of a question mark. But with that being said, these are kind of my quick thoughts for the AFC North in terms of the draft for each individual team, pick by pick, overall grades, and all of that. If there was a certain pick you guys liked, if there's a certain pick you didn't like, if there's a certain grade that I gave that you liked or didn't like, be sure to let me know down in the comments as well. And then with that being said, if you are a fan of one of these 4 teams, be sure to let me know that down in the comments. Definitely interested in to hear from all the fans, especially if you have different viewpoints than I have. But with that being said, if you are new to my channel, please consider subscribing. Definitely would appreciate it. It helps to build the community that we're trying to build here at Coach Craig Sports. At this point in time, there's 2 more videos left in this draft grade series. If you have not checked out the other 5 videos and you want to do so, definitely be sure to check that out. It's on the playlist for the NFL draft grade videos on my channel. And then with that being said, if you are a newer current subscriber who is yet to do so, also be sure to hit that notification bell down below and let you know every single time I post up a new video. But with that being said, that's all I have for today's video. Hopefully you all enjoyed. And then last but not least, special shout out to each and every one of you watching today's video. I truly do appreciate you taking the time out of your day to watch this video. Definitely means a lot to me, and I hope each and every one of you has a great rest of your day.